off with answering some photography questions last time, but there is still so much to cover. So I thought I would start off with this question, if that's okay. Do you need to book a photographer to the end of the reception?
That's a very good question, Sarah Kate. So, look, this is the way I see it with weddings is you get through the day, you go through your formalities and maybe you're doing your first dance, your father-daughter, your bouquet, your garter. Then after that, really that's called the end of formalities. So after formalities, basically people are just being silly, maybe drinking a tiny bit too much, being crazy. The photos tend to just get repetitive.
Yeah.
So if you want a bit of the dancing and fun stuff, maybe just say to your photographer, I'd like you to stick around for an extra 20 to 30 minutes just after the formalities so people are starting to loosen up. But you might be that type of couple that just your friends are going to tear up the dance floor and they are going to go crazy. And you say, you know what? I have to capture all of that. If that's who you are and that's what you want to do, by all means, just go ahead and do it. But I don't know, I just think as a photographer, many times in the past, I've been booked till the end of a reception and I'm kind of walking around and I've already taken photos of them dancing. I've taken that. And sometimes you wonder if you really need to be there at all. So I think you have to work out what type of couple you are, but it's definitely not necessary. I think you can just end after the bouquet, the garter, or formalities.
That sounds very good, and I agree with that. There's so many times that people are just sort of standing around, and most people start to leave after formalities as well. So, I think that's a good money saving tip, especially for the budget conscious bride. But I will just point something out. What is going on in your office? I can hear.
I don't know
I
what you're talking about, Sarah. You
I
can hear what?
It sounds like you've got a crazy monkey there somewhere.
I've actually got two crazy monkeys. So I have they're so cute. I have Chewy and Solo. I wish you could all see them. So for those that are just listening, jump on and have a look at the video. But I've got my two little crazies, Chewy and Solo, and I have to kind of shut them in my office because if not, they'll go out there and bark at anything that moves.
Oh,
But they're
bless.
having so much fun. They're playing and they growl and sound like wild animals. So no, nothing has escaped from the zoo, Sarah. It's
Oh,
just
look.
Chewy and Solo if you hear really weird random noises, all right? It's not me.
And bless their little hearts because, yeah, that would be interesting if there was something there from the zoo, but I'm sure that's another story.
Oh, I'm actually glad there's not. I'll take Chewy and Solo, thanks.
I think so. They're so cute too. Well, thanks for answering that one. How about we jump into how long do you think is a good time frame to expect your photos back? I understand that, and especially during peak wedding season, it will obviously take longer. But what do you think is a fair amount of time for couples to wait to get their photos?
All right, that's a really sort of an open question because there's
Mm.
so many different types of photography businesses out there. You might have the wedding photographer that works full time at a job and just shoots weddings on weekends, and that does happen quite a lot. So I always look at that and go, well, when are those photos going to be edited? If they're working full time, they're tired at nights, they're shooting on weekends, there's a chance that your photos could take a couple of months or even longer. But then you've got the photographers that might be small business, but that's all they do. And I think it's kind of good to find a photographer that isn't also working a day job. It's just kind of this thing I've got about photography that your real, true professional photographers are just doing that for a living and nothing else. Now, in that case, they have a lot more downtime during the week to be able to edit photos. You should be able to get them quicker. But there's also big companies that might have 8, 10 photographers working for them and they have their own editors. But based on how many editors they've got, once again, you could have to wait months because you're in a queue and there's 20 weddings in front of you. I feel as though if you can get your photos in 4 weeks or less, that's a really great turnaround.
Okay.
Fantastic. 2 to 3 months isn't unreasonable, particularly in high peak seasons. Because peak season, Sarah, there's photographers out there that can be shooting 3, 4 weddings a week. I mean,
Yeah.
that used to be me when I was, I don't like saying just a photographer, but when that's all I was doing was photography, I would be shooting, next morning up, going to another wedding, shooting, another wedding, shooting. And so people would just have to wait a while for their photos.
Mhm.
But don't rush your photographer for the edit, because you don't want your photos to be rushed in edit. You want them to take their time and do a beautiful job, like maybe softening the skin, removing a tiny wrinkle here or there, and just making things as beautiful as they can be with your photos. But that should be in your contract. How long till you get your photos? Make sure you clear that up before you actually lock them in.
And that's a really good point, which will lead me on to, I think, another question. What should you hire a photographer if there is no contract?
No,
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 no. What do you think?
no, and
No.
no.
Okay. What
Don't hire anyone
a
for a
wedding.
wedding unless you have a contract. And Sarah, a contract doesn't have to be something that a big company's lawyer has done up for them. Simply a contract could be something as a Word document done up that simply says this is the terms and conditions. Your name needs to be in it, your date, you need to see it. These days, you don't have to always sign a contract, because just the fact that something's been emailed and is responded back to, and someone simply says, like yourself says, okay, legally binding. But you have to get everything in writing. Writing emails is good. I always say in my business, nothing that we just talk about over the phone or talk about face to face is in concrete. It has got to be in writing. It protects me as a business person, it protects you as a client, bride or a groom.
Yeah, and I think that that is very good advice. And I actually, when I had my wedding planning business, I did have a contract as a wedding planner. You should. Um, I used to say to my clients, and I'm sure you would agree with this, a contract is actually a really good thing, not a scary thing, because it actually lays out, or a good contract should lay out, what you will receive, what the expectations are for the client, and what the expectations are of the vendor. And it's more or less like a frequently asked questions document, in the respect that, or you should be told in that contract, what will happen if there's an earthquake? What will happen if it's raining? What will happen if there is a pandemic? Like, all of those sorts of things should be laid out, not to scare anybody, but just so then people are aware of it, and you know what happens and what the procedure is if something goes wrong.
I think that's a really good point. Don't look at it as, oh, this is a boring old contract, I'm not going to
Mm.
read this. It's your protection, and it's also giving you peace of mind. And can you imagine how I've had to change my terms and conditions in the contract over the last 3 years? I mean, think about life in the last
Mhm.
few years: pandemic, bushfires,
Floods.
floods,
Yeah.
pandemic,
Yeah. Yeah.
floods. So there's all these things have to be written in, because if somebody's booked their wedding at my venue and 2 days before the wedding, the whole region floods, it's not my fault. But of course, I'm going to take responsibility and say, well, unless you can hire choppers to fly in 100 people, which they're probably busy rescuing people in floods, there's nothing
Exactly.
I can do. However, we will just pick that wedding up. Let's look at our diary. Have you got this date? Have we got this date? Let's just drop you across. So, yeah, it's upsetting that you're supposed to be getting married in a couple of days, but it could be a lot worse. It could be that you lose everything you paid. It just means that you just need to wait a little bit longer, and we'll just do it again for you. So, peace of mind. And if someone won't give you that, whether it's a cake maker, whether it's a florist, a DJ, no matter who it is, don't touch them.
Yeah. No, I would agree 100%, because yeah, you just can't afford not to, in that regard, in that regard. So I'll get back onto photography, try to keep on subject, but I did want to just mention that because I think it's really important. Um, yeah, so we just spoke about how long it should take to get your photos back. But how many photos should you expect? And obviously, I believe it would depend on how long you hire a photographer for, because not everyone does hire a photographer for a full wedding. But on average, if someone was to say hire a photographer from bride prep through to end of formalities, how many photos do you think that you should receive?
Oh, once again, every photography and photography company is different. I know back when you got married and had your really unpleasant experience with your photographer, which I think we
Yes,
talked about in the
last
last
episode.
episode, which was the first episode of photography, because
Yes,
it's just a shocker. She's probably brought you to why you're in the wedding industry now because you had such a shocker. You want to make sure to
yes,
other couples.
that's
Um,
right.
okay, some photography companies still to this day will say, we will take photos. We will send you thumbnails, which is just little pictures you go through, you pick out 500, 100, 200, 300, whatever, and any more than that you choose, they'll charge you. There's still a lot of companies doing that. I feel as though we've kind of hit that stage in technology that you should be able to have the photos which you're taken without paying extra for. I say around 50 photos per hour, I think is quite reasonable. Because
Okay.
Sarah, if I'm shooting a ceremony, for example, just give you a quick example, as the bride walks down the aisle to the groom, I might take 20 photos because she might have a weird look on her face in one. He might be blinking in another. One just might not look as flattering on the bride as the other. So out of those photos, I might just be saying I'm looking for 5 amazing photos, not giving
Yeah.
him the crappy ones. So a photographer will take a lot more to take out the ones you wouldn't want anyway, edit them beautifully and send them to you. So if you're looking at prep through to formalities, let's say I think a standard wedding day photography is about 8 hours. So if we
Yeah.
set around 50 photos per hour, that's like, how's my maths, about 400 photos.
Maths is spot on.
There you go. But it's,
It's
do you want thousands of photos? I just think it's crazy. You don't want. I've had couples over the years say, "Oh, I want every photo you took, even if it's blurry, even if people are blinking." And it's like, well, hang on, that's kind of a bit like an artist going, "Well, I'll just paint this artwork. uh, it's a bit crappy. I didn't do that properly, but I'll just put my name on it and put it out there anyway." Photographers are artists. We don't want to release something unless it's amazing, like a videographer isn't going to give you some terrible footage where you look awful because that's their name on it. So I think around that 4 to 500. Who's got time to look through 500 photos these days anyway? But you must have this conversation with your photographer. And if you think, hang on, this person's saying, in the money I'm paying, I'm getting 100 photos, but I have to pay then an extra $20 per photo I want, you got to really start doing the math because that might have made a good deal super expensive.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, so I totally agree with you there. I think that it just depends on the photographer, and as you said, they are artists, and they don't want to they don't want to put out bad work, which is really good for you as a consumer because you know what you get will be quality.
Absolutely. And there's this thing in life that I really believe. As a photographer, I say a photographer is only as good as their worst photo. It's like a chef is only as good as the worst food they put out. I mean, you've
Mhm.
got to be consistently good. But just quickly, that raises an interesting point is professional photographers shoot in what's called raw.
Yeah.
And raw means that what they're shooting in the camera can be like 50 megabytes per photo. Now think about that. That's massive. So
Mm.
I've had people saying it happens all the time still. We want all the raw files. Well, any photographer that gives up their raw files without edit, once again, it's that thing of your name on something as an artist. It's crazy. And they would have to buy a drive just to put them on because there would be that much information. And I don't want to give someone every photo I've shot because I might have taken 10 that almost are completely identical, but I just go, right, the couple look amazing in that one. Not them to have those photos. So you will get your photos as JPEG files, but a professional photographer always shoots in RAW and not JPEG.
Yeah. And that's the key, I think, because and especially these days, a lot of people are more understanding of the JPEG RAW thing because cameras are so good. Like even on our phones these days, the cameras are amazing. And so many people kind of understand that the JPEG is a smaller file than a RAW file. But it's really good to hear that comparison from a photographer.
Look, Sarah, too, the reason that we shoot in RAW is because if something's not quite right with the photo, if it's a little overexposed, underexposed, it's a little bit grainy, noisy, we have every little bit of information in that file to correct it to make a beautiful photo. But if you shoot in JPEG, which is a compressed file, and you need to do a little correction, you can barely correct a JPEG. So there's a good technical reason behind that. I know wedding photographers that say, I only shoot in JPEG. Well, that's great. You must be the best photographer on the planet that never, ever gets anything less than 100% perfect per shot, because that's them saying, I don't need to correct my work. I'm perfect. And none of us are perfect, Sarah. When something happens in a split second at a wedding and you've got to turn your camera and just spray images to get the right one, sometimes it might be just a little bit off, and we can fix it if we have raw files.
Which is really good to know. And that also makes me think of, should you make sure that your photographer is using a professional camera that can actually have 2 memory cards in there, so then there's backups because, technology is great, but it can fail.
Oh, Sarah, I just about had sweats then remembering. Now, I don't even know if this was years ago. Now, you can remember
Yeah,
this, can't you? It was in the
I
Hunter
can.
Valley.
Yeah, it
And
was.
I had a camera with 2 cards in it
Yeah.
that decided to go wacko, and it actually started shooting over what I shot. And we realized this was happening on the wedding day. And
I remember that. That's what I thought of when I was listening to you. I thought this would be
oh,
great for people to actually know
geez.
what to look out for,
I tell
you
you
know?
what, I nearly just drove myself to the airport and got on the first plane to Mexico. That was terrifying. Now, fortunately, we were shooting with a really good videographer friend who I managed to be able to get some still files from the video footage. So the ones that were missing, I got out of it, but I did everything right and still something went a little bit wrong. But if I hadn't had the 2 card slots in my camera, I could have lost them all. But there's one more important thing, I think, Sarah, than that. And that is, do they have a backup camera with them in case something happens? But you don't want
Yes.
them shooting with the best camera as their lead camera and using their crappy old 10-year outdated camera as the backup. You've got to have a lot of expensive gear to be a good photographer. Like, I've got my camera bag sitting behind me, and there's got to be $30,000 of gear sitting in there, because my
Mhm.
second camera has got to be as good as my first camera. I've got to have backup lenses. So I think that's a really good point. You ask the photographer, what do you shoot with? Okay, what's your backup camera? If they say they don't have a backup camera, say thank you for your time. Goodbye.
And run. Run as fast as you
Run
can.
really fast.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, on that note, I think that we just need to, get to the little story that you're going to share with us today about the time that you shot a wedding in Sydney and the couple actually broke up before the end of the reception.
Yeah.
That's
Seriously.
like
Can you imagine? This was a long time ago. This could have been 15 years ago.
what
I was in
yeah.
Sydney. It was all at a really nice hotel. So they were staying in the rooms. The ceremony was inside. We did photos inside, and things were okay during the wedding day. And then I was doing the photo shoot. And I had the couple in a spiral staircase to get these beautiful dramatic photos looking down the staircase. And as I'm trying to take their photo, they were about 2 floors down, so I'm zooming in. I'm like, are they having a fight? They can't be having a fight. This is their wedding day, their bridal shoot. Anyway, I saw it getting really super heated. So I ran down the stairs. Oh, is everything okay? Da 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 da. Da. I knew it wasn't okay, but they sort of pushed through. So
Yeah.
we finish, we go to the reception, we're upstairs, and something starts going absolutely just crazy in the reception. And I realised that it's got around. The groom has found out that the bride was having an affair, and the guy she was having the affair with was a guest at the wedding. So somehow this came out on the day, and a big brawl broke out,
Oh
and
my God.
everyone left. The reception ended, and that was the end of the wedding. In my earlier days, it was could be 20 years ago, Sarah. It was in my earlier days of photography back then, when you used to get half the money before the wedding and half the money after.
Oh
Well, as you can
no.
imagine, I never got the other half, and I never edited the photos, and they never wanted the photos. So I have more stories than that too, but I'm holding them out for later. But that was a humdinger.
Oh my gosh, I just can't even imagine, like, oh, that would just be so bad. And how did you feel
It
when
was,
that was happening?
I
Like, I would have
think,
felt so awkward. Like,
it was awkward. It was uncomfortable. I didn't want to get in the middle of it. But the worst thing was, I thought, I don't think I can take photos of the
of
brawl and
course.
everything happening. So I kind of just stepped back, and I thought, I can't do this. No, it's over. And I guess I'm getting an early minute tonight.
Oh my gosh, that is
That
insane.
was
So
something
when
Yoda couldn't fix, Sarah. I can fix so many things, but I couldn't fix that. And she did end up going off with the guy she had the affair with. So whether they lived happily ever after, I doubt, but
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
cray
Well,
cray.
when you say that you have seen it all, that
Oh, that's
that's
just the tip of the
seeing a lot
iceberg.
of it. I
You just
know.
wait. I have so many stories like that. Like, I think stories I've even forgotten that when I really dig deep, I go, oh my God, I forgot that happened. Yeah, a
Well,
lot happens.
you're gonna have to dig it. You're gonna have to dig deep and remember them because I think we need to share them with all of our viewers.
I'm taking notes.
Good job. Good job. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. Let's yeah, let's call it a day and